Welcome to The Helping Conversation, an exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of facilitating trusting, safe, inclusive, and effective helping conversations with others. Recorded at RockVox Recording and Production Studios, Rochester, New York, Mouth Off at RockVox, rockvox.com. Having enjoyed an almost 40-year career facilitating his own authentic brand of the helping conversation, your host, Executive and Recovery Coach, Keith Greer.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for making the time today in your busy schedule to sit in with us on another episode of The Helping Conversation. I grew up playing lots of sports. I think I started playing Little League Baseball. I lose track. It was a long time ago, but I think it was maybe somewhere around fourth grade. And so through Little League experience, with baseball, with football, and into sports, into high school, I had the opportunity to interact with a number of coaches who to this day, although some of them I cannot remember their name, I remember pieces of our interaction. So as I was driving over today to record this episode, I was thinking of this coach I had early in my Little League experience. So again, I'm thinking fourth, fifth grade maybe. I don't remember his name. I don't even remember what he looked like. But I have this very vivid memory of after a game, standing in a conversation with him. Actually, it was my mom and he were having a conversation. And it was the first time in my life I ever heard the word potential. And he was sharing with my mom that he felt I had really good potential as a baseball player. For some reason, here I am at 61, and that conversation still rings in my head of the power of that word. I remember feeling like, wow, like I can do anything. And here was this, somebody's dad who was volunteering to coach our Little League baseball team who used this word, and it has stuck with me. I can think of another coach I had somewhere in my early football career. I think it might have been middle school, so I would have been playing some level of Little League football. I can't remember his name. I can remember his face, and I can remember his voice. And he was just always this really positive, upbeat person. And we were at a practice in the fall, and a bee flew in to like the neck of my uniform and got stuck under my shoulder pads and stung me twice. And from that point forward, this coach just always called me Stinger. And I always remember that. And I remember it with a smile on my face because of the relationship that I had with him. And I can think of a football team I played on in high school, and we were horrible. And in this case, I don't remember the coach, but we won one game that year. The only game we won 2-0 on a safety. We were really bad. And to this day, it's one of my best memories from a team standpoint of just really enjoying the people on the team, in spite of the fact that on the field we were not very successful. And moving forward more into today's world, in my 30 years as a school social worker, I had the opportunity and the privilege to interact with many, many coaches within the school system that I worked for. Did a lot of training with them, especially around issues around substance use disorder, and just always walked away with this powerful reminder of how impactful a coach can be, and how that impact goes so far beyond the X's and O's of their sport. Because as in the cases I've already shared, I have memories from 50 years ago that are still with me. And so I'm so excited about our conversation today, and to bring into this conversation around the helping conversation, the role of an athletic coach. And so I would ask you to join me in welcoming my guest today, Michael Aufrichtig. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for making the time. Let me share with everybody who this gentleman is, and then we will jump into the conversation. As one of the most knowledgeable and well-connected figures in fencing in the New York City and area and across the nation, Michael Aufrichtig is in his 10th year as the head men's and women's fencing coach at Columbia University. After being named to his current position in June of 2011, Michael has built Columbia Fencing into a national power. Since that time, he has guided Columbia to 3 national team championships, 11 total Ivy League team titles, and countless number 1 national rankings on both the men's and women's side. In addition, the Lions have claimed 3 of the last 5 NCAA fencing titles, and each of the last 5 years, Columbia has finished no lower than 3rd place at the NCAA Fencing Championship. Michael is a 3-time Ivy League Women's Coach of the Year honoree and a recipient of the 2016 USA Fencing Coaches Association Varsity Coach of the Year Award. For the last 15 years, Michael has served as the chairman of the New York Athletic Club Fencing Program, one of the most notable fencing organizations in the world. He has also served as the 2009 Women's Epi Coach at the World Championships in Antalya, Turkey. On an international scale, Michael served on the USA Fencing Board of Directors from 2014 to 2016, was a 2012 USA Olympic fencing coach for modern pentathlon, and served as the 2009 USA Women's Epi World Team coach. Michael fenced at New York University himself and graduated from the Stern School of Business in 1994. And again, a big welcome to Michael Aufrichtig.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Yeah, isn't it always nice when you hear your bio? I always dig it. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, wow.
I've done some stuff. It's like your mom or dad are talking about you and doing a little bragging, which always feels kind of good. So again, welcome. I so appreciate you being here. You are my first guest who walks within the realm of being a coach of a team, never mind a team of this high stature. I'll also say I'm incredibly excited about this, Michael, because I know nothing about fencing. So even just from the conversations we've had, I've learned some things. So I always ask my guests to just start with just a kind of a quick synopsis, because I know you have such an interesting story that started in a place where you would not think fencing would start. A quick synopsis of how you got to where you are today in your position at Columbia University.
Sure. So growing up, love sports, tried all the sports. All my friends were playing, basketball, football, baseball. So I did it as well. I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana. Louisiana is a big football state, but my height and my weight by the time 6th grade came was not good. And I was pretty much getting smashed a lot. So football went out the door when I hit middle school. But I still played all the sports. But it wasn't until high school I was actually changing schools to a program in Shreveport called Caddo Magnet High School. And 2 days before class started, my mom got a call, and I was signed up for general physical education at the time. And they said, well, your son is signed up for general physical education, but that overlaps with advanced French. And so for your son to be able to be in advanced French, he can take gymnastics or fencing. My mom said, are you going to take gymnastics or fencing? And being in a new school, I didn't know which sport was cool. I love Star Wars, and hitting people with swords sounded fun. So I'm like, let's do fencing. And my first year it was pretty cool. It was exciting, but it wasn't until my second year where I met then my best friend of now over 35 years, Wesley McKinney, who's actually my volunteer assistant coach right now. And he kind of took me under his wing. He's about 6 years older than me, and saw something special in me, as did Sharon Settlemeyer, the coach there. And we qualified to the Junior Olympics. And the Junior Olympics were in Florida, Orlando, Florida. So we got to go to Disneyland as well. And so we went there, got my butt beat. But that was when I realized it was a true sport. And I saw 1,000 other kids. I said, one day, I want to be there. I want to be in that top 8. I want to be up on that podium. And then from that point on, part of my life's journey was, how can I be the best fencer I can be? And that led me to a lot of great opportunities over the last 30 years.
That's great. That's great. So the mecca of fencing is not Shreveport, Louisiana.
No, not at all. It's kind of funny. The fencing teacher there, Sharon Settlemeyer, she was doing everything she could to help the program. But ultimately, we were buying fencing videos of like the '84 Olympics and trying to copy that. And eventually, there's fencing camps. So we went to fencing camps. We were trying to be, information sponges, trying to get as much as we can, trying to figure this out. But we weren't bad for what we had. But it wasn't until I moved up to New York, I chose my colleges based off of fencing and went to NYU to be around the New York Athletic Club, which at that time and still is one of the best FA fencing programs in the country.
Right.
And then that year is where really my results shot up.
Right. So even that, I wonder how many people know. I know I sure didn't until you and I started talking. How central New York City is to the fencing, the United States fencing world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I would say in the last 10 years, fencing pre-pandemic really expanded. So at one point, when I first moved up 30 years ago, New York was the place. It's the hotbed. It still is. But instead of, 90% or 80 or 90% of the Olympic team coming from New York, now I'd say it's probably 50 or 60% because it has expanded around the United States. But yeah, it's definitely a hotbed.
Yeah. So you came to New York, you came to NYU to both fence and go to school. Just quickly, how from that moment in time you moved to the point of, because I understand you started working in the business world, and where did becoming the head coach at Columbia fit in?
Sure. So I always, my whole dream was all I wanted to do was fence. That's what I wanted to do. But it's hard to fence when you have to pay rent and, bills and different things like that. Fencing, there's no professional fencing. There's no way to, get the sponsorship deals that you can in some other sports. I hope that might be changing in the future. But, with that, so I always had another job and I fenced. And I was always intrigued in the business world. I ended up going into the tech space of online database systems, online fundraising, online registration, back when no one was even using their credit card online. So it was breaking cool new technology. And it was very fulfilling in providing systems to these nonprofit organizations to help them raise more money for the poor, to maybe find a cure for a disease or something like that. But while I was in the business world, I was fencing and then I was volunteering. So there was a position at the New York Athletic Club called the chairman of the program. It's a volunteer position, but basically you're the manager, right? And you do everything from recruiting to managing the budget to even running practices with the coaches and everything like that. And when the coach at Columbia was going to retire, some of the fencers at the New York Athletic Club who were at Columbia said, "Hey, Michael, you should apply for that job." So I never even thought of it.
Right.
Now, looking back, it's yeah, it's the dream job. All I want to do is ever fence, and now I can be the head coach. So it's fantastic. And it took a few people to say no, you can be good. You can be good. And then I'll come back to, my best friend, Wesley McKinney. He said, "Michael, if you don't apply, you would be doing Columbia an injustice."
Right.
So I applied.
Right. So how nice it was that you were blessed with some people in your life who it sounds like, at least, to use my words, were very coach-like with you. Right? We're helping you see your strengths and helping you think about taking a risk and maybe moving in a direction that came as a little bit of a surprise.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So listen, before we jump into, there's a lot I want to talk about around your philosophies and structures that guide your coaching, because I want to highlight something for listeners. When Michael came to Columbia in 2014, he walked into a program that had a very significant history of not being successful, at least in the near past when he walked in. So what he has accomplished, when I read his bio, is very, very significant in where he was able to relatively quickly, I think within about 3 years from the things that I have read about Michael, get this program to a program that is seen as a perennial NCAA and Ivy League power. So that's really significant. But as one of those guys who grew up playing your pretty typical baseball, football, basketball, I just am so curious for you as a fencer, before we even get to your role as a coach, what is it about that sport that allowed you to become so passionate about it?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And it's one of the first questions I actually ask when speaking with someone that might be interested in Columbia and in our fencing program. What is it about it that you love, right? What's your passion? And for everybody, it's different. And what I will say, for myself is I was always a competitor and always loved sports. And everybody gravitates to sports in different ways. But for me, fencing, there was really no one way. So no disrespect to, let's just say, the track runners and the swimmers. I can never swim well, but I did run cross-country track, so I love running. But, it's like you're running against time and you're competing against yourself, which is great. And I will say in any sport you're competing against yourself. But for fencing, we're related to chess at 100 miles per hour because there's no one right way. There's multiple different ways to win. There's multiple different ways to, change your tactics, and there's multiple different ways to become good at it. And probably just like any other sport, but for me, it was fencing. You're never mastering it. You're always finding out something new. Here I am 30 something years into it, and I'm still learning.
Right.
And so for me as a fencer, just the constant learning, the constant changing, the constant, new things that were happening, like this chess game that was physical, was fun. And when I explain it to younger kids that are just getting into it, a lot of people are into video games, and it's like you're in your own video game because it's all electric. You're fighting with swords, and so it's not like someone decides if you score or not. It's you either score or you don't, because the scoring machine lets you know.
Right.
And so, it was the chess at 100 miles per hour is what really drew me to it. And it was very competitive. And then slowly you start learning that, wow, this sport takes you not only all around the country, but all around the world. And I just like the community. The community of fencers were really great people.
Right, right. So I'm already hearing this theme of relationship, right? Just building strong relationships with people, right? And we're going to get into this because this theme you have brought to Columbia and that you have built the success on of team first. I found fascinating, especially in today's world of sport, where so much is about highlighting my individual accomplishment. But I want to go back to 2014. I had the opportunity to watch the video of your TED Talk, and you talked about that one of the practices that you believe took you from Shreveport, Louisiana, out into the greater fencing world was paying attention to details and being open to new ideas. So talk a little bit about that, how that helped you move forward, and then how that plays a role in today's world in your practice as a coach.
Sure. So just giving a TED Talk was a great reflection, a great exercise. So I didn't even know what a TED Talk was. And, they call me up after we win half of an Ivy title. So that was in 2014. In 2008 was the last time we did it, because our team, at one time they were like 2-16. We were like at the bottom of the barrel. So we kind of came through and they said, we think you have a story to tell. So going through that exercise, I came out with these two themes of paying attention to details and being open to new ideas. And I will say that in paying attention to details, I just look back at my life and I was always very detailed and very detailed in different things like, all right, don't leave, what's that term? Underneath, what's something with a rock or something like that? Don't leave a stone
unturned,
something like that, right? So there's that type of detail, but then there's also detailed in listening. that's why I was very intrigued to speak to you. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that sometimes we think we hear, but if you really pay attention, you hear it differently. And so, when it comes to conversation and details, and I know we're probably going to get more into that. There's a lot there, but also in preparation. So, it's always, and you hear this a lot in sports, but it's also in life, prepare for the worst possible thing that can happen.
Right.
And so, when it comes to logistics, when it comes to even details about, how can we be the best we can be, make sure you cover everything. And if I don't know everything, I'm going to ask other people, what do we need to be the best we can be? So that's, right. With the detail. To be open to new ideas that's how I actually became good at fencing. I was looking at so many different coaching ideas, different books, different videos. And that's what helped me be a strong fencer. And so, with that, the individuals that we're recruiting now at Columbia, they're already good. And so if you can come into an environment saying like, hey, you might have a lot to contribute, but still be open to new ideas, that can make you that much better.
Right.
And so having that open mindset, and what Carol Dweck says, in
right.
Growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
So like having that type of mindset just makes it so much more fun in doing anything, I think. And so in our world of fencing, paying attention to the details so you don't mess up, right? So you kind of have everything covered. And then having that growth mindset, that open mindset just makes the environment so much more enriching and so much more fun.
Right, right. So I have I have a series of very specific questions, but before I get to them, I want to ask you the more general one around, so you meet somebody, some prospective recruit for your program. From your first interaction, how do you go about shining a light on that relationship, on creating trust and safety, and on, I would imagine, not only wanting to attract somebody to come to Columbia, but being very honest about what is involved in being a part of a team coached by you?
Mm-hmm. Well, so you said the word, and from the very beginning, honesty is what you said. And from the very beginning, I always said, I will never sell our program. I will tell them what it is. Right. And, I read many great books about many great coaches out there. And what I found is the great coaches were very honest and created a very transparent and trusting environment. And so copying what they did, and also what I feel is just great in general. When I first meet someone, I'd like to stay away from, oh, what do we do in practice? And, what do you do? But just tell me about you, right? Just what are you passionate about? Tell me about your family. Tell me about, and also, how did you get into it? The same way you opened the question with me, tell me about your story, right? And then slowly get into the conversation of, what are your dreams? What do you see as your best 4 years of your life? Because, any program, any sport, there are differences. There's a lot of differences. And in many cases, our program might not be for someone, and what I always say is, look, I found the most successful individuals in our program had 3 qualities. Number one, they loved fencing. And of course, there's going to be tough days, but they just love it. Also, they love the idea of a challenge. And I'm actually almost finished with the book Grit right now. And it's like Angela Duckworth, she mentioned this, and, and maybe it's cheesy, but, in fencing, it's a tough sport. You start with 200 individuals or 300 individuals in a competition. And at the end of the day, there's one winner and 299 losers, and it's like, that's challenging.
Yeah.
Columbia or any Ivy League school is challenging. And, if you like challenges to push you, then this is a great place for you. This is a great environment for you. But if you're trying to cut corners and you just kind of want to get by and move through, it's not. And the third thing I always say is the idea of, having the city right outside of our gates. That's kind of like the third and final thing. So those are some of the things that I think about in that initial conversation.
So one of the things I read about you, which absolutely blew me away, when I think about this level of athletic competition that that Columbia Fencing is a part of, is that you do not have required practices.
Yeah.
So I read that, and I had to read it a couple of times to see if I was reading it correctly. So in that, and you say it's about doing what you need to do to be the best fencer you can be and the best teammate you can be. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, so I will say from the very beginning, when I first got here 10 years ago, we did have required practices. And we even I came in and I said, all right, here's the varsity team and here's the junior varsity team. And people are like, what? We don't have a junior varsity team. I was like, and when you make varsity, you get a locker. You look back and the team members right now, sometimes I feel they might even think I'm a little bit of a pushover, like I'm almost too kind. And I'm never a mean guy, but I would say I was tougher at the beginning because I really wanted to find out who wanted to be here,
right, and
who thinks that they want to be here. Because everybody wants to be a champion. I mean, I don't know if you go out on the streets right now and you go, hey, do you want to be the best at whatever, whatever they're passionate about? For the person who says no, I don't know if there is, everyone wants, but what are you willing to do to be that champion, right? Like what, and I don't even use the word sacrifice, but what are you willing to do? And so with that, probably it was about 3 years ago, we don't have any more mandatory practices, right? Because if you don't want to be here, then we don't want you to be here. Yeah. And so it's very big in the recruiting process to make sure that everybody wants to fence for 4 years, right? It's very important. And look, if you don't want to make the Olympics, that's cool. You don't want to make a junior world team, that's fine, right? The fence for the 4 years, right? So, in that, we come up with, all right, here's, 3 or 4 different practices a week. Some are focused on fencing, some might be a private lesson, some is speed and agility, some is strength and conditioning, some is stretching. We have, massage therapists, so we have this whole thing, sports psychology, nutritionists. Now, let's find the best program to help you be the best you can be. And so what might be good for you, Keith, might be different for myself or might be different for somebody else. And what we learned from the very beginning is that we're not comparing each other, and also we all go at our own pace. So someone might be an NCAA champion their freshman year, but someone else might be an NCAA champion their senior year. And it's not a race. It's how you get there. And the beauty is, we're deep enough where the expectation is for you to come in as a freshman and, it's okay if you're not NCAA champion next year because it's all about helping you be the best you can be. And I've read many things and saw many things, but just through the experience, fencing, it's an individual sport. So all from the time they're 10 years old, they're competing against each other. It's me versus you, me versus you, me versus you, me versus you. So they come here together and it's like, hey, look, our goal is to win team titles. So it's no longer me versus you, it's me with you.
Right.
And we're competing against ourselves yesterday. And how can we rise up together in this culture, right, where it's always been me versus you? And how can we rise up together to be the best we can be? Because that has helped individuals achieve their individual goals of making world teams, maybe the Olympics, and individual results while we're winning team titles.
Right.
And it's scary, Keith. Every year, it's like, it's been since 2014, we've won something every year. We've won something every year. And just this past year, so this year we're not competing. The year before, NCAAs was canceled. And our men's team won 6 Ivy championships in a row. And by 2 touches, they finished second. That was a weird feeling. But then our women continued winning. So it's like, it's very tough staying on top.
Right.
But the culture we have has really helped everybody, rise to be the best they can be.
What strikes me, though, Michael, is what you're describing here. Even what you just said a few moments ago about that you encourage the student athletes not to compare themselves with each other, to figure out how to go at their own pace. That is a bit of an antithesis of how most of us are brought up to think about our role on a team. Mm-hmm. So the level of trust that requires between the student athlete and you, and the student athlete and their fellow student athletes, that's pretty phenomenal for people to buy into that and believe that it is in their best interests.
Yeah, it is. And I've made mistakes along the way. We didn't get this good. I didn't just walk in and this was this. It was by different mistakes, even in selecting starting lineups and different things. Very interesting. John Wooden had a lot of parents calling him. I was reading in his book and complaining why their son wasn't playing. So what he did was he had the team go and rank and make the starting lineup. So I used that one year when people were kind of complaining about time. And it was funny because you would always have my lineup that I thought, plus the individual who I didn't think would kind of put themselves kind of in there. And I made it all anonymous, but I said, hey, look, if you want to see where your squad ranked you, come to my office. But it wasn't like shaming them or anything like that. It's like, well, why do you think? And I'm a very positive person. I always want to keep it positive and everything. But sometimes you just have to keep it real with somebody. And they know why. They're like, yeah, you're right, coach. I really haven't been practicing as much as I could have. Right. Or I haven't been giving I haven't been focused at practice. I haven't been doing it. I'm like, well, do you want to be in the starting line? Mm-hmm. Yes, coach, I do. Let's work on a plan to get you there. Right. So sometimes we have to be put in check. It's what I call it, right? Put in check. And so things like that help.
So you call it put in check. I call it in the coaching world, in my coaching world, I call it speaking the truth. That one of the things that better way. Right? That one of the things that coaches do is if we've done the things we need to do in your world or in my world to engender trust and engender safety, really engender that relationship, then there's a space in there where I can speak the truth to you. And as you said, it doesn't come across as attack. It's not shaming. It's not blaming. It's just, here's the truth in how it relates to your goal of moving forward as you've defined it.
And I'll tell you, that's very interesting because so in 2015, the first year we qualified the maximum amount of individuals to the NCAA championships, which is 12. We all sat around a table, and after we brought in our sports psychologist, Dr. Brent Walker, and at the time he's been with Columbia for a few years and he was understanding fencing, and I was telling him how we actually all communicate with each other in something called strip coaching. So like in tennis, there's no coaching, but in other sports, like there's timeouts and everything. So in fencing, you get that. And so he sat us all down and he said, okay, so everyone's going to lose a match. What do you want to hear when you lose a match? Mm-hmm. What do you want to hear when you win a match, right? And it was really funny because a story that I tell, we had two freshmen that were part of it. And one of the women said, Coach, I love it. You just tell me to forget about that last match. You give me a high five, we move forward, and it's awesome. And then the other woman said, Coach, look, when you tell me that, I just want to punch you in the face. And I was like, what? Because I'm like, everybody keep it real. Say it, like, don't hold anything back. And I'm like, why are you telling me this now? She goes, well, you're the coach. I wanted to respect you. And that taught me a lesson. So from the day individuals walk in, we say, are you someone that would like to hear, as long as you win 2 matches, Keith, out of your 3, you did your job. Or do you want to hear, as long as you only lose 1? I mean, it means the same thing. It's 3 matches. Like, how do you want to hear it? Or do you want to hear nothing from us?
Right.
You don't even want to hear it.
Right.
But then we do it your way. And if that's working, great. But if it's not working, then we can do it our way. You give us permission to use all our knowledge to speak to you, as opposed to me just breaking in and being like, Keith, come on, man, calm down. Because maybe when I'm saying calm down to you, it doesn't put you in the right mindset.
Yeah. So I noticed that from some of what I was reading, you call that customized communication, which is brilliant. So one of the things that's in my head right now as I'm thinking about this customized communication and your no required practices. Have you ever heard of the theory of psychological reactants?
I don't think so.
All right. So it's a well-researched theory in the psychological world. You're welcome to Google it. And the theory of psychological reactants basically says, and I always need to use a symbolic way to tell you what the definition is. The theory says that when we tell people what to do, especially when it's unsolicited, the instantaneous neurochemical reaction in people's brains is this.
Yeah.
And for listeners, I am putting up my middle finger. And it's one of the things we know. And so what I love about everything you're saying is you so honor that. So when you talk about no required practices, what I hear in my world is you're treating people as their own best resource. And you're treating people from the perspective of true autonomy. This is your gig, person. It's your human being. Your thing, human being. You tell me what you want to do and how invested you are. Because when people make decisions in that way, they're much better decisions because it's mine. And Michael, your customized communication, I love that term. It just, again, I think of it, some of the work I do in the corporate world where that yearly evaluation is still there and people give people feedback and no one ever asks the person, tell me how to give you feedback in a way that increases the chances it's going to be productive for you. This question you ask your members of your team, Michael, not many people ask this question. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and what I say is when I first started, a lot of people thought I had some, very crazy idea. Come on. It's all about the technique. It's all about the physical. Yeah, there's this, but you got to have fencing technique. If you don't have it,
sure,
you're not going to.
Right. The athletic talent we understand.
Right. But it's really these small little details and these conversations and these different things that, and ultimately what this is doing is building this culture. I call it a culture of love.
Right.
That's what it is.
Beautiful.
The culture of love. It's of trust, and it really resembled itself. Let me tell you a great story. It was the 2019 national championships, and our men's team went out and they killed it. And they won 90 bouts. We were in the lead by 4 over Penn State and 8 or 12 over Notre Dame, who we thought was going to be our biggest competition, and we're even leading them by 12. And so the next 2 days, the women are up. And so the first day, the women go, and they did well, but they didn't perform as well as they probably would have liked to have performed.
Right.
But we're still in the lead. We're up by, I think we were 6-4 with Penn State, and Notre Dame gained 4, so it was 8. So we're still up by 4. And it looked like, someone just got a call and their dog of 15 years died or something. It was really sad. And so I told everyone, go out, to dinner, and we're going to come back and we're going to have a meeting. And a lot of people flew because it was in Cleveland all over the country to come. We only traveled with the 12, but everybody else came to support their teammates. And we're all in a circle. And I kind of loaded it. I told one of our men's fencers to come up with a speech. And he actually wrote down a speech. And he's like, this has been a great year, and I'm very thankful for this. And then people start going around the room, and some of the seniors, were crying, God, this is my last tournament with you guys. And what this meeting gave to the 6 women that were going to go out the next day was, look, we don't care if you win or lose. We just want you to go out there and be the best you can be.
Yeah.
And I know you hear that term a lot, but it's really just go out there and be the best. Be the best you can be. And at the end, when you walk off, whatever the score is, if you say, Columbia Fencing, I gave you my best.
Yeah.
We all go off into the sunset.
Yeah.
And with that, the next morning, our women won 81% of their match. And champion performance is 65%. So they did what I've never seen in my life. And at the end, so once again, we're up by 4 and 8. We won by 12 at the end. So if you look at the final results, everyone would be like, oh, Columbia won wire to wire. They dominated the whole time. But it was very close at the end. But at the very end, because they knew that the team believed in them, and all they asked was just to go out there and do your best.
Right.
And the pressure was, once again, as you said, on themselves.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just going to go out and do my best, because either way, they're still going to love me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Look, I think within the world of relationship, right? So even if we take this away from this specific relationship between a student athlete and coach and student athlete and their fellow student athletes, in the world of relationship, what do we know? We know that in my relationship with you, if I know that no matter what happens, you will love me and accept me and see me as whole, and it frees me up to take risks. It frees me up to be vulnerable. So I'm going to assume, and I'm not a sports psychologist, that those two things alone translate into a calmness in my athletic performance that wouldn't be there if somewhere in some corner of my head, I'm worried about that if I lose this, what's the coach going to say? What are my teammates going to say, et cetera?
It's interesting you say that. The year after we won 2 NCAA titles in 2015 and 2016, we kind of reversed our question from, what's your goal for the year to what are you most fearful? And there's the Trinity squash coach. I read a great book called Run to the Roar. And he asked his team this question. And so I was kind of curious. And the biggest fear of our team was letting their team down, letting their teammates down. And when you take away the fear of what is letting your teammates down?
Right.
It's, what is it? It's not winning or losing. So it's not losing. Everybody loses a match. Everybody loses points. It's not that. It's not giving your best effort. That's how you're going to let your team down, And then even when it comes to practices and different things, you might have 5 midterms, Don't come to practice. Please don't. It's like, it's okay. Now, if you really want to, I don't want you to get injured if you didn't sleep all night, right? But give the best you can. And that. And if you need help, the coaching staff is here. And
right.
And at the same time, we're always evaluating each other. But once again, and you mentioned evaluations like in corporations and departments, like that. Our evaluations is to be honest with each other. But so we evaluate ourselves. So that's one thing we do. Are you committed? Are you intentional? Are you selfless? And then we evaluate each other. And then if you get a lower score from your teammates, ask why. Because if someone's always late to practice, is it because they're being disrespectful, or is it because they're up to 3 a.m. because their father's been in the hospital for 2 weeks and they wanted to be in the hospital with them? So it's like, make sure we understand everything before we make any judgments.
So you actually engage your student athletes like in a 360 evaluation.
Oh yeah,
they're going to get feedback from their colleagues.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and so in fencing, there's 3 weapons: foil, epee, saber. And then there's 2 genders. We have our women's team and our men's team. So initially, what we predominantly do is so if you were in a corporation, maybe the sales team would evaluate the sales team.
Right.
So our men's foil fencers evaluate the men's foil fencers, but they won't evaluate the women's saber fencers.
Yeah, sure.
Just because they know each other more, right? So, and they're around each other more.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
right. So another aspect of how you come at coaching that I had to read a couple of times because I couldn't believe that you do this, but it appears that you do. So again, for those listening, I need to emphasize, where within the realm of fencing Michael and the Columbia team is. This is high level, Division I, NCAA level, international level. So this is significant stuff for probably an assortment of the student athletes on your team who might have aspirations to go above and beyond fencing for Columbia. So let me read you something that I read that absolutely blew me away. So it said Michael prefers to use a full roster. This strategy, along with Michael's encouragement, has helped create a team where individual fencers will choose to forego bouts that could earn them all Ivy berth so other teammates may fence. Although the fencer might lose out on the individual honor. They are helping their teammate gain experience so that the Lions can remain competitive for future team titles. All right, dude, you got to talk to me about that one, because that is on a whole nother level of building a sense of team.
Yeah. So even when you say that, I'm tearing up, because that's probably one of the most proud things that I have, with our program is this, you hear a lot of teams and a lot of coaches and you even heard it last night in the Super Bowl, with Tampa Bay talking about family and being selfless and in the Ivy League championships, you have to fence a certain amount of bouts in order to be all Ivy or even have a chance to win the individual title in 75% of the bouts. And when I first, started coaching here, it was very cool for people to become all Ivy. It's great individual, but that's when we weren't winning team events, And at the end of the day, to kind of drive this home, I said, who won all Ivy last year in whatever weapon, and someone, you might be able to name one or two people. I'm like, well, how about the year before? And then 2 years, it's hard to start naming people. And I'm like, well, let's go back the last 5 years. Who won the team title? It's like, okay, this school, this school, this school. And it's like, when we come back in 10 years for our 10-year anniversary, it's going to be a lot more fun to talk about how we all won the team title together than as opposed to you winning your second team all Ivy with this little certificate that you're probably going to lose in 10 years anyways. And the funny thing was, over the years, every once in a while before Ivy, someone will say, hey, coach, how did you become all Ivy? And then that's where I'd say, well, who was all Ivy last year? And I'm like, and then I used to bring certificates of what people wouldn't even pick up. Here's all the certificates that, because all people cared about was winning the team title afterwards. So, with that, there are strategic reasons for using the entire roster. Match play. Some people are better against others. Even in our lineups, I come up with my lineup with our coaching staff, but then we let the captains in the team come up with their lineup and we see if it matches. Then we go over it with them. So it's kind of like, we're with Tom Brady and the offense coordinator, and like, what do you guys think we should be doing? Right. Right. So it's their team, and I feel that this helps them even more in the world when their time comes to be leaders. Right. at the end of the day, even now, more so now than before, it's like, I want enough time. I'm good. I got rings for every single one of my fingers, but I want you to have a ring. Yeah. Right. So I'm going to give you my thoughts. You give me your thoughts and let's come up with something. End of the day, it's my decision, but they really have a lot of input in this. And so I'm really proud, like every year. And like, so our women, they won their third in a row. We actually, this past weekend, we had a virtual celebration. And to kind of keep the crowd engaged before we started the celebration, I was asking some polls and trivia questions. And one of them was, how many all Ivy women FA fencers did Columbia have in their, 6-0 team effort? And I put, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a lot of 3s and 4s, and the answer was 0. Because although they all had winning records, no one had enough bouts to qualify for all Ivy. All Ivy. Another amazing story, we had one of our seniors so we have a senior banquet at the end, and she got up and she gave a speech how we already won the Ivies. This was in 2019. And so after we win, sometimes we just try to put in even more players, right? Just for more experience or seniors or somebody. And one of our first years, one of our freshmen came up to one of our senior captains and says, "You're taking my bout." And that bout cost her an all Ivy. And so that gave the senior even more pressure, but she went and she won it. And she said that was her best memory of like her fencing career, that one of her teammates who could have been an individual champion, gave her that bout. And those are like life lessons. Oh my gosh. Right? Yeah. And so things like that just makes me feel like such a proud coach, that they're embracing this. And what leaders are they going to be, after they graduate? Yeah. Yeah. That's phenomenal. And especially in light of, and it's changing, although changing slowly in corners of the corporate world, the increasing recognition that success, in our jobs and success
in any kind of corporate setting is based on being able to work together as a team, not as an individual, which I think that individual perspective flourished for many, many generations that just go in and think about yourself. But we know that that is not true, both on the corporate level of the company being successful, never mind your own level of success and enjoyment and satisfaction.
No, and so I used to fly United a lot. I mean, Continental a lot before United bought them. And Gordon Bethune was the CEO there. And one of the things that he did was genius in reading different leadership books and different things. Was they were the worst at baggage handling. And so he said, all right, if we're number one at baggage handling, the entire company gets like a $75 a month bonus, you know? And so like for me, I've always been the type of person where, why doesn't the entire sales department get a bonus? Why doesn't the entire athletic department, like, let's work together. Let's, and it's not about the money, obviously, but like, what can we do to really encourage people to work together? What's best for the team?
Right.
In our case, it's an Ivy national champion, an Ivy title or an NCAA title.
Right.
Right. That's what we're working towards. But then that will just translate to life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I want you to talk about this concept of deliberate focus practice, and especially around the coaching strategy you created to help your fencers ready themselves for 4-4 matches. Yes.
So there's a lot of studies out there, and probably get the most hype with Malcolm Gladwell and the 10,000 hour rule from Erickson. And there's, all these different things out there, especially in chess. And you look at like Tiger Woods, ever since he was younger. And so with all that, when I was just starting coaching, I had this curiosity of how many matches actually come down to, we'll call it that final touch. And so in college fencing, it goes to 5 touches. So when the score is 4-4, that next touch wins. And so we call it high pressure situation. 2 seconds left in basketball, last shot. 2 minutes in football, and 2 minute no huddle drill, right? Yeah. So in fencing, it's 4-4.
It's almost like sudden death overtime.
Sudden death overtime, exactly.
Right.
Yep, exactly. You got it. And so I went back at like all these World Cups and just went down every single direct elimination and found out that 26% when the time I did it. So let's just say 1 in 4 times your match comes a one-touch match. And then I was like, how often are we actually practicing this? And the answer was 0. The only time we were practicing it was at the competition.
Right.
And so when you hear about experience and everything, you go to 10 competitions a year. You have about 3 of these 4-4 one-touch matches. That's 30 in a year. So in 10 years, you have 300. So you're pretty experienced and you get a lot better at it. So what we started doing was putting pressure in, focusing on these one-touch matches, these high-pressure situations. And to kind of put pressure on it, in my TED Talk, I said, if someone loses, they would do 100 push-ups. To be completely honest, the only reason why I said push-ups is because I didn't think the general audience would understand advanced lunges. So advanced lunges is like a footwork for fencing, okay? And so we don't do 100 push-ups. Because 100 push-ups for fencers, that make us look good at the beach, on a beach, but it probably won't help our fencing out.
Right.
So at the very beginning, when we're doing these drills, we would say, all right, if you lose one of these, you would have to do 100 advanced lunges. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And then if you lose again, it would be 200. If you lose again, it would be 300. And so I used to joke around, like either you become very comfortable with these one-touch situations, or your advanced lunge is going to be one of the best in the country. And that'll help you become a better one-touch fencer.
Right.
And so beyond, the one-touch, then I started looking, well, what are some other common situations that happen a lot that we're not practicing, and we do that in practice? Like you hear that term, being comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, right? Whenever the match is on the line, it's kind of uncomfortable. But if you do it over and over and over again, and you have ideas on how to have that positive self-talk or the right self-talk in your head, it just becomes comfortable. So Now, when the score's 4-4, you see some parents over there and everybody's off. For me, I'm like, we got this. It's like, great.
Yeah.
We lose sometimes.
Sure.
But we win most of the time. And, there's even, time management drills. So in fencing, you go 3 minutes. So many times you might be down 4-2 with 10 seconds left. I'll never forget, there was a 1IB championship. That exact situation happened. And you get one timeout per match. So I went up to our fencer and I'm like, man, this is awesome. You got this. And I high-fived him. He's like, what? Like, what are you talking about, coach? I'm like, we did this drill hundreds of times.
Right.
It's 4-2, 10 seconds left. You got this. He goes, yeah, I guess you're right. And so he went down, boom, 4-3, tied it up, and then won in overtime, 4-4.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so cool when you can when you practice, and it actually works.
Yes.
So the deliberate focused practice, what initially kind of got my mind to it was the pilots. They do all the simulating for worst case scenarios, right? So I said, how can we do that in fencing? And so we just come up with the most common things that happen in fencing, and we practice it over and over and over again by putting some sort of extra pressure on it.
Right. That's awesome. As I was reading that, I was thinking about, again, in my world, I would call it affect management, right? That just working with folks around preparing for and understanding under what circumstances you will experience uncomfortable emotional states, and how to, as you said, be prepared for it, celebrate it, welcome it, but also figure out how to continue to be productive in that state when maybe in the past you haven't been at your best when that state walks in the room. Right.
No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So I'm mindful of the clock. I feel like you and I could talk for about 3 hours here.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it.
So I have to ask you about this last piece because, again, in the mindset you bring of empowering your student athletes to take responsibility for themselves, but also, as importantly, and maybe even more so, treat each other with love and to be the best for each other. Let me read something that I read about how you go about doing this work. Because my understanding, and you just said it, is in every match there can only be one timeout. At a competition, there's multiple matches going on simultaneously. So it's impossible for you as the coach to be there to, quote, coach every single match, right, for every minute of every match. So in learning how to coach and support each other, members of the team acquire knowledge on one another that, in some cases, makes them more equipped to offer guidance than a coach. They understand the emotion and frustration experienced on the strip. They witness each other in all types of competitive situations, and often they've even fenced the person their teammate is competing against. It is not typical for a collegiate fencing program to include such a large amount of teammate coaching, but Columbia is not your average team. And this quote comes from one of your student athletes. The way we operate as a school, 99% of the time, your timeouts will be from a teammate.
Yeah. So, I look at this as, well, it's definitely one of our differentiators, and then it's also helping them all grow in life. Being a student athlete in athletics in the NCAA was all about enhancing, your education, right? So what better yet to have them work with each other to be the best they can be, right? So, there's a little kind of backstory of we're trying to empower them and let them grow. And for the coaches, it's also, I'm not sure how many coaches can do this, but to be able to step back, right, and be like, I might not have all the answers, and someone else, might have a better answer or a better influence than me.
Yeah.
And so, with that, once again, you have to have a very trusting environment, culture that very transparent, and where, people won't take things personally, because if someone doesn't want to hear from me and they want to hear from another fencer during their matches, that's cool, but they still give me permission and I give them permission to speak to me. So afterwards, could come back and be like, hey, here's some things where I think you could have done a little better, or here's some things that you did fantastic, right? So, and also they, meaning the 18 to 24-year-old group, they can relate to each other better.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from our team members.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from them. And empowering them to, speak to each other, to help each other, has been one of our best secrets. And I'm happy to even say it, because it's not even a best kept secret. There's articles and everything about it, but to train it, to practice it, to do it takes work.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't just be like, all right, we're doing it.
Right.
No, we practice it.
Yeah. Because one of the as I was reading about that, and I didn't include it in the quote I just read, but what struck me as I was reading about it was that your athletes were discussing what we talked about earlier, which is their recognition. Not only that as a fellow student athlete, they might just relate better to someone their age, but their recognition of, as we talked about earlier, about needing to be cognizant of the way their teammates have instructed them to speak with them.
Yes.
Which is just such a phenomenal skill that most adults have, and yet your team as a team is recognizing, all right, I'm there for you, but I'm going to be there for you in the way you've instructed me to be there for you.
And you'll like this, Keith, because we were talking about like evaluations and everything. Yeah. So after competitions, we also do evaluations, right? What could I have done better the day of the competition? What could I have done better the week before the competition? What did I do really well that I think helped me the week before and the day of? So like, what are some things that worked well? What are things that we could have done better? And then after we do our self-evaluations, we're in groups and we talk about it to each other, because maybe what you said, Keith, I was like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have had barbecue the night before, or yeah, I probably should have, arranged something where I could have got more sleep or something like that. So
that's awesome. So listen, we got a couple of minutes left here, but I did want to ask you one last question. You commented in something I read about the role of diversity and what diversity brings to the success and measuring that in many different ways of your program. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, our team, from the coaching staff to the fencers themselves, come from all over the world. And, even Columbia University, we are known as one of the most diverse universities. And from the school perspective, they say that you get engaged with many people from many different areas and you learn new things. And I say very much so in our fencing team as well. And, we have individuals from different continents. We have individuals that are different religions, different race. And what's so cool is when you do have this open, trusting, transparent environment, you can really learn so much from each other, with that. And that kind of comes down to being open to new ideas, right? We talked about paying attention to details, but being open to new ideas, just about people themselves, because what someone might do coming from Israel or from Korea or from Sweden, or from Switzerland might be very different than someone coming like myself from Shreveport, Louisiana. Right. And they might learn something from someone from Shreveport, Louisiana, and I'm definitely going to learn from someone, from Europe or Asia. Right. Yeah. So, on the fencing strip and off the fencing strip. So that just brings a whole nother layer of growth that I feel, kind of gives us sort of that edge in everything that we do.
Right. Michael Aufrichtig, this has been such a cool conversation. And I want to highlight something, because I know sometimes, in the helping world, people can say, well, all of this sounds really cool, but maybe it's kind of fluffy. We're a team, we're there for each other. I want to remind everybody from about an hour ago when I introduced Michael of what success he and his team have experienced, that comes from these types of coaching philosophies, comes from the creation of team, and that the team maybe sometimes is of bigger importance than my individual accomplishment. And yet, as a result of that, people accomplish great things individually. So this isn't just some touchy-feely stuff. This is working on the highest level of athletic competition that we know of. Michael, thank you so much for making the time today. I'm feeling the need for a part 2 somewhere down the road.
Yeah, love it.
Because this was just a wonderful, enlightening, upbeat conversation. And I hope for anybody who is listening who works within the realm of athletic coaching that they will think about some of what you have brought to Columbia. It just so honors you are a coach, a true life coach, above and beyond whatever you teach them about the athletic practice of fencing.
Yeah, no, and I'll just say this last thing. I knew this would happen, Keith, when I first spoke to you, that you would pull things out of me, and so I appreciate that, because for me, what's really funny is, I'm in my dream job. I'm doing what I love, and I'm just doing what I feel is right. Now, Of course, I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm doing different things, but doing all these things that I feel is right, and then getting the results that we got, I'm almost laughing. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, we just won, another Ivy title, or we just won another NCAA champion. It's like, are you kidding me? So no, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, Columbia University and your students and the world of fencing are blessed to have you in the role that you are in. So I promise you, my friend, we'll pick this conversation up somewhere, because there's definitely a part 2 here.
Great. Thank you.
So I hope everybody found that conversation as fantastic as I did. I just loved it, and speaks to in any area where human beings are interacting with each other, the importance of trust and safety and coming together with a common goal, and maybe even putting aside a little bit of individual accomplishment in the name of something greater. It works in the athletic world. It works in the corporate world, and it was such a pleasure to have Michael join us today. So I hope you will make some time to sit in with us again on the next episode that will be coming your way, as we continue to shine a light on the immense skill and talent of people like Michael that invite another into that compassionate, complex, and intimate space called the helping conversation. Everybody have a great day.
We thank you for sitting in on our discussion today on just one unique version of the helping conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's podcast, so we sincerely invite you to follow, rate, and most importantly, review our episodes. For more information on Keith Greer and this podcast, log on to keithgreercoaching.com. Please join us for our next episode as we continue the exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of the helping conversation.